That's a good reminder to separate the intellect and just focus on the emotion. So I'll start there. I was feeling furious and outraged and resentful, quite frankly, resentful, drained of energy. And that's what made me feel resentful and exasperated, if I were to assign fairly strong emotions in this particular conflict.
Okay. And what about the intellectual sound bites?
So the intellectual sound bites, he's so pessimistic. He's always hopeless. He brings me down and drains me. And he doesn't care about the burden this puts on me.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I've had sound bites like that. They just don't understand me.
Exactly.
Okay, so now when we're looking at the intuition, that we're trying to find the intuition, it's a little trickier. Sometimes if you think of, what would Jesus tell you to do? What would a great spiritual leader tell you to do? What would your best friend who knows you and loves you and is kind tell you to do? What would your caring mother tell you to do? If you can't figure it out, because oftentimes we get in those places where you see, like you said, you have all of these intense emotions, and now you have these thoughts about how he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that. It's hard to separate those out. So for me, very quickly, I heard, look at yourself. And for me, it's just a form of do the work, do the revolution, do your process. Because I know that when I do the process, I get the miracle. What's going to inspire me to do that process when I'm in that place? So that was to look at myself and to be kind. Those were the two intuitive messages. And also remember, intuition is a small statement. It's a declarative statement, so it's going to tell you to do something. And it's about the next step that you're about to take. So in that way, we can't figure out what intuition is going to tell you to do tomorrow when you get in a situation. It's all about present moment and what that intuition is picking up about the situation and what's good for the whole. But here we're going to imagine that it's going to work that way. But just understand, as you go forward with your intuition, it's all about what's going to happen in present moment, not what's going to happen next week. So what was your intuition telling you?
Well, there's two branches, if I could share, as what came out of this. And the first nugget of intuition I received was to set up boundaries. That was the very first thing that I needed to do. And that it was not my responsibility to make him happy. And that was a direct action that I had to take for this conflict, but it wasn't the full revolution. So I don't know if you want me to get to that part later.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay. So initially my intuition said set up boundaries. And that's, like you said, it's a nugget of 3 words. That was my first step.
Okay, so now we have our matrix. We have our intellectual sound bites. We have identified what our emotions are. We did some conjecture about what compassion would want us to do for the good of the whole. So there's 2 things. And I'm going to introduce Cathy in a minute, but I want to get to these 2 things about the intellectual sound bites. Our next step is to revolve those sound bites back onto us. So I actually had poor communication. I was actually making assumptions. And in this case, Robin, you were figuring out that, we won't get to the whole thing yet, but you would revolve yours to figure out that you had a hopelessness, right?
Yes, and I had to find where I was also pessimistic, which originally was, I'm not pessimistic. I'm the most optimistic person I know. So, I'll get to that more later.
Right. For those of you doing this at home, create that revolved sound bite and have that ready, because I want to bring on Cathy right now and have her share some stuff that went on. And then we're all going to kind of rev this together and give you an idea of how it kind of works across the board. Good morning, Cathy. Are you there?
Good morning. Yes, I'm doing great. How are you?
Good.
Okay, so I would just like to share real quick that I loved how Robin talked about the rescuer and the coach, because it's so easy for me to slip from one to the other. So that was really cool. And then as far as conflict resolution, for me, when I first learned this years ago, I learned that the things that helped me the most was that I was talking about and thinking about my feelings versus feeling and actually breathing them through my body. And then understanding the differences and a really clear definition about emotion, intellect, and intuition helped me to go forward and make my life much easier.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to share that. And so, like, Barb spoke about leading by example. And so I had this experience yesterday, which was so interesting. And Barb likes to name the conflict, and I think that's cool. So I have Tammy's conflict, which I named being blocked from all directions, and that's where I had a Conrad within a Conrad. And then the other one is called No Longer Being Here, and that's about my daughter and my son-in-law. So yesterday morning, I was working with my friend Tammy, and we were getting to a core issue, which was preventing her from manifesting the money, the job, the home, the man. And she felt like she was being blocked from all directions. And as I was with her, and we were going through the process of conflict resolution, going through that process, she stops and says with much passion, you're blocking me also. Why do you do that? I watch you receiving help from all your other friends, and yet you block every offer I give you. I offer to cook a meal for you or do your dishes and help you during chemo, but you deny my help. Why? Why do you do that? Can you tell me why? And that was a case where when we talk about we can come in to conflict resolution at any level, I'm not even sure I had a conscious soundbite, but I went right into the feeling and the breathing.
Because you were obviously triggered.
Figure out what is my truth? What can I tell her? What can I answer her? And I didn't want to hurt her feelings. So I'm, at a place, what is my truth? What can I tell her? And so I had the backstory of, I just told myself that the reason for not letting her help me was because she hadn't been through cancer or chemo, and she was unable to understand and give me the support I needed. But right there, I automatically went into feeling and breathing so I could get to my intuitive message, which you want me to wait for, correct?
No. What was your intuitive message?
Tell her the truth. And then at that moment, the truth came to me, what the real truth was. And it was, I don't trust you. And so to be able to tell her, because we had a past experience that was a misunderstanding. She thought I was sleeping with her boyfriend and sent terrible text messages demanding that I confess to her. And she was so convinced in her mind that I was guilty, it got really ugly. And so we had become friends again, but I had kept her at arm's length and refused to accept any help she was offering me because I was so angry. I didn't trust her enough to let her all the way in. So that was so empowering. And then talk about leading by example. So in the middle of coaching her through her conflict, I had to stop and feel and breathe to help us to go forward.
Okay, well let's leave that one right there, and then let's go to the one that we worked on.
Yes, and so Friday I had a call from my daughter, and she was crying. She was afraid that her husband was dead, but her phone had died. She had to borrow a phone to call me. There was no way for her to go home and check on him. So what happened was she had left for work that morning and couldn't find him anywhere. And he had kind of been threatening, oh, you're going to miss me when I'm gone. And so she has to go to work. She checks the house, the barn, everywhere. She can't find him anywhere. So she goes to work, and she's devastated all day long because she doesn't know whether he's alive or dead. So that's why it's called that conflict no longer being here. And so I dropped what I was doing and drove to the town and checked on him and found out that he was still there. And what he had done was he hid from her that morning when she left for work to make her feel bad. And he figured, once he was dead, she would really miss him when he was gone. And by hiding from her, it gave her a taste of that. Oh, let's get back to where I was so overwhelmed with how to deal with that the next day. I had to go back to Conflict 101 and call you, Barb, and ask for some guidance through this because I was so overwhelmed and frustrated myself, I couldn't get to my sound bites. So when we finally got to them, my sound bites were Craig was good at manipulating. He wasn't helping the situation. And what if he wasn't here anymore?
Wow.
So those are my sound bites from no longer being here conflict.
What was this emotion? Because this is really intense.
I was feeling completely overwhelmed, frustrated, and this goes back to, I wanted to be the rescuer, so I, go in and try to fix the situation. Overwhelmed and frustrated they were just so overwhelming I couldn't think. I was so overwhelmed I couldn't think clearly.
So were you angry?
Oh, yes, angry, frustrated, annoyed, disappointed.
When we get overwhelmed, I think sometimes it's that we have all those feelings supersized.
Yes.
What intuitive message was in this conflict?
Well, for me, I had to ask for help.
Yeah.
And so that's why I called and asked for guidance through this, because even though I automatically know this process and it comes to me so quickly and I go through it without even consciously realizing what I'm doing sometimes, this one just blocked me so much that when I stopped to feel and breathe, the intuitive message was ask for help.
And I think it's really interesting, just as an aside, how these two conflicts involve asking for help.
Yes.
And I do want to say that when Cathy and I talked in the morning, originally we were going to talk about the layout of the show and was going to and then she came in this state and said, would you coach me? And I shared with her the content that I had already formulated talking with Robin, and we thought what a wonderful opportunity to show in real time that this really works. And you were the guinea pig, and you were in that place where emotions were so intense and thoughts were out of control. And when you were having the conflict and we were breaking down the pieces at the same time. Oftentimes when somebody's in a training session or they're at a workshop, you're not actively engaged. It's not a triage moment. You're bringing it in as an intellectual story. So you were actually in that moment. And when we got to the place where it was like, what would the intuition have told you to do? Let's imagine what it told you to do, but all we had to do was look back and identify what that was, and that was ask for help. You asked for help. It's beautiful how conflict resolution becomes this operating system. And not only does your intuition tell you to ask for help, but then your intellect dials the phone to get the help. You don't have to go, oh, I don't need help. I'm not, you don't have to go through that anymore.
And yes, thank you for helping me define this, because I'm still, in the middle of processing all of this, since it's so new, it just happened this weekend, that, just trying to explain it to someone. I appreciate your help in clarifying what we're going through with this.
Yes. And I
But
would,
it worked.
I also would think, and this is something I think Robin will address as well. My conflict happened very quickly and was revolved and resolved really quickly, and I quickly got to this miraculous place that I'll share in a minute. But more often than not, it takes time to do this. So in talking about, say, Mr. Downer, Robin, now that you had the revolution back to yourself, I think we need to share then what is this actual process that we now do. There's two components to it. One is to deal with emotion in a new way, which is to breathe it, not to analyze it. And the other is to really change the thought that the emotion is marrying itself to create your reality, and then change the thinking process. And these are two big things. These aren't just easy to do. So tell us about processing Mr. Downer.
So it went off into two branches. So that's why I wanted to share this conflict, because it will help people to see that sometimes we have to work things in multiple ways. So with Mr. Downer, I did have to take action steps to get that relationship to a healthy place. And that required setting up boundaries and seeing that my kindness is helpful for people, but there's a shadow side to kindness too, which is we let ourselves get taken advantage of or feel that we have to take responsibility for someone else's happiness. And so for him, I needed to set up healthy boundaries and take myself out of that responsibility, because I needed my energy to solve the technical issues of what was going on and not solve his emotional. It wasn't my responsibility to prop him up. But then I had to step back into the witness and work with the really deeper sound bites, which were the pessimistic and the hopelessness, because at first I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see it in my life because there's so many areas in my life where I'm very optimistic. So I had to step back further into that witness and ask the greater part of me, show me where I'm pessimistic. And I think that oftentimes we can ask that greater part of ourselves when we're not seeing it to show us. And then step further into the witness and watch what comes up and look for deeper intuitive messages. And over time, what I found was that it was in my intimate relationship part of my life, not my work life, not my life as a mother, not my life as a coach, not my life as an athlete. All of those things I'm very, very hopeful and optimistic in. But when I think about going out on a date or feeling that I was somehow going to be successful in a romantic relationship in my life, I wasn't hopeful, Barbara. I wasn't, and I was pessimistic. And that's where my work was.
And it's such a great illustration of why conflicts are so hard to address, because when you see something like this and you realize his trigger of you into this place was really your energy calling you to look way over here at a place that had nothing to do with him.
Exactly.
Now, I want to ask you this too. You probably, like we all do, while you were working this, because I know it took you, how long do you think this, a year, months?
I talked with you several times during this period of time about it, and I would say it took me, I'm a year in right now.
Right.
It's right about this time last year where I realized I needed to set up boundaries, and then it took some time to just work with the emotion, to realize where the pessimism was, to come up with an action plan. And I'm just now starting to make some real headway in both a new relationship with this coworker, because I still have to work with them, and a new relationship with my own optimism and hopefulness in my romantic relationship area of my life.
Sure.
Yeah, so it takes time and patience, and coming back to being committed to self-love and self-compassion is really crucial for this work.
Well, and I want to ask this question because Cathy, you brought it up, and then Cathy brought it up, and then as you were talking, I was thinking about some conflicts that I have about when we want to be nice.
Yeah.
And I get hammered. I had this conflict, I called it the kitchen dishes, and my roommate was leaving dishes in the sink, and this was a year conflict. You would have thought I could have just said, hey, Julie, can you clean up your dishes? But I couldn't. And I was being hammered in my brain about how small I was, that I couldn't just wipe off this bowl for her. I was just really critical, thinking that I wasn't being nice enough, and you're so selfish. So while you were trying to set these boundaries, I'm sure you're struggling with some of those kinds of voices.
Oh, definitely, definitely, and having to do things that I wouldn't normally do, such as let his calls go to voicemail.
Yeah.
So that I could hear the voicemail and stay focused on doing a good job with just the technical part. Because I thought my job isn't to prop him up emotionally. My job is to work the issues. And so we didn't have to spend 20 extra minutes on the phone working through his emotion. And then I'd be so drained, I couldn't do my job well. So
okay, so
yeah,
getting back to the moments where we're feeling this emotion, we have the intuition. I'm going to set some boundaries, but then you let it roll to voicemail, where you're actually making a decision to set a boundary.
Yeah.
Doing it different, but there's this anxiety, this shame, there's these thoughts about you're really not a nice person, Robin.
exactly.
So in those moments, because this is why it takes a year or more sometimes, because in those moments, those are the moments, and this is what Maxine, this is one reason why I was inspired to do the show, because Maxine came back after her first night of feeling and breathing and noticing these terrible thoughts, and she said, yeah, I was feeling and breathing all night and nothing changed.
And then she gets into a cycle of being hard on herself.
Yes, and this is our patterns. But what I want to reiterate and did to her, or tried to with her, is that something may not change in that moment, but what's different is you're observing yourself now, and that's a first step of when you observe and experiment, it changes. So just the very fact that she's observing it is a beginning step.